Welcome to our archive of the unsettling. Before we descend into the shadows of the past, I must ask that you subscribe to this channel. It is the only way to ensure these stories are not lost to the whispering static of history. Click the button and the bell so you never miss a transmission. Now, settle in. Let the hearth grow cold. We travel back. The year 1829 found Blackwood Manor in a state of profound and suffocating silence. It had been 6 months since the formidable preacher Vance had been laid to rest in the damp earth of the congregational graveyard, but his absence was not an emptiness, it was a presence. It was a heavy judgmental vacuum that pulled at the curtains, chilled the flagstones, and settled like shroud dust on every surface. His widow, Mistress Elara Vance, ensured his memory remained as rigid and unyielding as the man himself. Elara was a woman carved from ice and iron. In the village, they said the preacher had hollowed her out and filled the space with scripture. Not the scriptures of comfort, but those of sulfur, judgment, and the terrible swiftness of the righteous path. With her husband gone, that righteousness had no counterbalance. It turned inward, focusing with terrible intensity on the only 2 souls left in her charge, her daughters, Emmeline and Seraphina. Blackwood Manor, once a place of stern but functional life, had become a mausoleum of piety. The curtains, once a deep cranberry, were replaced with heavy gray wool, blocking the already meager New England sun. The house itself seemed to be holding its breath. Emmeline, at 19, was the elder. She possessed a quiet resilience, a spark of her mother's iron, but it was tempered by a warmth her mother had long since extinguished in herself. She remembered vaguely a time before her father's fervor had consumed them all. She remembered him reading poetry, a smile touching his lips. But that man was long gone, replaced by the thundering oracle of the pulpit. Emmeline moved through the house with a quiet efficiency, her duties performed with a precision designed to avoid notice. Seraphina, barely 17, was different. She was the fleshly one, as her mother often declared with a sigh that sounded more like a hiss. Seraphina was comprised of sunlight and air, prone to humming forgotten melodies, her fingers tracing the frost on the windows, her eyes drawn to the vibrant, sinful world outside the manor's gates. She was everything her mother feared. The house was currently without staff. The previous servants, a local woman and her daughter, had been dismissed a month prior. Mistress Vance had declared their presence too worldly, their quiet gossip a gateway to indolence. The incident that sealed the manor's fate occurred on a Tuesday. Emmeline and Seraphina were in the kitchen garden, tasked with digging up the last of the winter turnips. The air was sharp, biting with the promise of a long winter. Across the low stone wall, young Thomas Giles, the son of a neighboring farmer, was mending a fence. He was a plain, sturdy boy, and he offered Seraphina a shy, gap-toothed smile. Seraphina, starved for any human interaction that was not steeped in judgment, smiled back. A genuine, radiant smile. Then a worse offense. She laughed. It was not a loud laugh, merely a burst of light in the gray afternoon, sparked by something Thomas had said about a stubborn mule. Elara Vance had seen it from the pantry window. She did not storm out. She did not raise her voice. She simply appeared at the garden gate, her black bombazine dress seeming to drink the light around her. "Seraphina," she said. The name was not a call, it was an indictment. Thomas Giles scrambled away, his face pale with terror. Seraphina's smile vanished, frozen on her face before crumbling. "Inside," Mistress Vance commanded. That evening, the sisters sat before their mother in the parlor, the fireplace cold, the only light from a single sputtering candle. "The world," Elara began, her voice the sound of dry leaves skittering on a grave, "is a mire. It seeks to pull you down, to soil you. The sin of flesh is a hungry thing. It starts with a look. It thrives on a smile. It fattens on a laugh. I see now that I have been lax. I have allowed the world to press too closely." Emmeline clenched her hands in her lap, her knuckles white. "Mother, it was only a moment. She meant no harm." "Harm is not always intentional," Elara retorted, her eyes fixed on Seraphina, who was trembling, her gaze locked on the floor. "The slightest crack in the soul allows the mire to seep in. Your father, He understood the rigor required. He understood that to keep the soul pure, the vessel must be scoured. Serafina whispered, "I am sorry, Mother. I forgot myself." "You did," Ilara agreed, her voice devoid of comfort. "You forgot your purpose. You forgot that your body is not your own to indulge. It is a burden to be borne, a trial to be overcome. And I," she said, rising to her full, imposing height, "have allowed this house to become complacent. We are unprotected." She looked at her daughters, not as a mother, but as a warden inspecting her charges. "Tomorrow," Ilara Vance declared to the shivering room, "I will seek out new servants, not the idle gossips of the village, not the weak-willed and the worldly. I will find servants who understand the necessity of shadow. I will find those who understand the virtue of cold. We require diligence. We require cleansing. And this time the cleansing will be absolute." Emmeline felt a chill that had nothing to do with the fireless hearth. It was the chill of a door being bolted, of a key turning in a lock she did not know existed. Her mother's eyes, in the low light, held a terrifying, unfamiliar gleam, the fervor of a zealot who had just found a new, terrible purpose. Mistress Vance did not go to the village. She did not consult the neighboring estates nor send an advertisement to the Gazette in Boston. 2 days after the incident in the garden, she harnessed the old carriage horse herself, a task usually left to a hired man, a man she now forbade from the property. She dressed in her severest black, her face veiled, and took the coastal road north, away from the populated towns. She was gone for a full day and a night, leaving Emmeline and Serafina alone in the echoing manor, subsisting on stale bread and cold water. When Ilara returned, she was not alone. The carriage wheels crunched on the gravel path just as the weak afternoon sun was dissolving into a bruised purple twilight. Emmeline, watching from the upstairs landing window, felt her breath catch. 2 figures sat beside her mother on the carriage bench. They were silhouettes against the fading light, but their stillness was unnatural. They did not shift or look around as they approached the imposing house. They sat as if they were statues being transported. Mistress Vance brought the carriage to a halt. She did not wait for them to disembark. She simply descended and walked to the front door, which Emmeline hurried down to open. "They are here," Ilara announced, sweeping past her daughter. "They are Mr. Silas and Mrs. Grieve. They will see to the running of the house, and they will assist me in the curriculum." The 2 figures entered Blackwood Manor. They did not knock. They did not wipe their feet. They glided over the threshold, bringing the evening's chill with them. Mr. Silas was a man built of long, sharp angles. He was unnervingly tall, dressed in a suit of such a dark, lusterless gray that it seemed to absorb the candlelight around him. His face was pale and gaunt, his eyes recessed in deep shadows. He held a single small leather satchel. He did not smell of the road, of horses, or of the sea. He smelled faintly of dust and dry leaves. Mrs. Grieve was his counterpart. She was short, stark, and appeared as solid as a block of granite. Her dress was the same flat, lightless gray. Her hair was pulled back so tightly that it stretched the skin of her face, giving her a polished, impassive mask. Her eyes were the color of a winter sky, a pale, flat gray that saw everything and revealed nothing. She carried no luggage at all. They stood in the entryway, side by side, and looked not at Emmeline or Serafina, who had crept down the stairs, but at Mistress Vance. "The house is spiritually untidy," Mr. Silas observed. His voice was a surprise. It was not the deep bass one would expect from his frame, but a soft, dry rustle, like sand pouring slowly into a jar. "It will be put in order," Mrs. Grieve stated. Her voice was the opposite, flat, cold, and final, like a hammer striking stone. "Indeed," Ilara said, a strange, thin smile touching her lips. "You will have quarters in the attic. They are sparse." "Sparsity is clarity," Mrs. Grieve replied. "You will begin tonight," Ilara commanded. "The house must be prepared. The daughters must be prepared. We understand the nature of the flesh." Mr. Silas rustled, his shadowed eyes drifting toward Serafina for a fraction of a second. Serafina flinched and stepped behind Emmeline. "It is mutable. Go," Ilara said. "Begin the hushing of this place." Without another word, the two servants turned and ascended the main staircase. They did not walk like normal people. They moved with a disturbing, fluid economy, their feet making almost no sound on the wooden stairs. They did not climb. They flowed upward, their gray forms disappearing into the gloom of the second-floor landing. "Mother," Emmeline whispered, her voice tight with alarm. "Where did you find them? They are not right." "They are precisely right," Alara corrected, unpinning her bonnet. "They come from a place where piety is not a suggestion, but a simple fact of existence. They understand the great work. Your father, in his final days, wrote of them. He wrote of the curators, those who could cleanse the vessel so the soul might be pure." Curators? Father wrote of them? Emmeline was certain her father, for all his fire, had never mentioned such people. "His private ledgers," Ilara said dismissively. "He understood that the world's stain is deep. To remove it, one cannot use a gentle hand. One needs specialists." That night, the house began to change. Emmeline lay awake, listening. Usually the old manor was filled with noise, the groan of settling timbers, the skittering of mice in the walls, the whistle of wind in the eaves. Tonight, there was only silence. It was not a peaceful silence. It was an enforced, pressurized stillness. The house's natural sounds were being systematically erased. She heard a soft, scraping sound. Not a skittering, but a slow, deliberate scrape. She crept from her bed, cracked open her door, and peered into the hallway. In the moonlight, she saw Mrs. Grieve. The woman was standing before the large, ornate mirror that hung at the end of the hall, a piece Emmeline's grandmother had brought from France. Mrs. Grieve was holding a small pot and a rag. She was methodically applying a thick, gray paste to the glass, dulling its reflection, blotting out the world it captured. She worked without pause, her movements precise, efficient, and utterly devoid of humanity. Emmeline backed into her room, her heart pounding a dull, heavy rhythm. A moment later, she heard another sound, a soft, rhythmic thud, thud, thud from outside. She moved to her window and looked down into the garden. Mr. Silas was there. He was moving through the rows of withered rose bushes, the bushes Seraphina had loved. He was not pruning them. He was driving a simple wooden stake into the ground at the base of each bush. He would drive the stake, pause, and then move to the next, a gaunt shadow performing a ritual only he understood. A terrible cold dread settled on Emmeline. The new servants were not cleaning the house. They were neutralizing it. They were silencing it. And she knew, with a certainty that turned her bones to ice, that she and her sister were next. The regime of Mr. Silas and Mrs. Grave began not with a proclamation, but with a creeping alteration of the world. They were the architects of subtraction. The first thing to go, after the mirrors, was comfort. When Emmeline and Seraphina awoke the next morning, they found their rooms changed. During the night while they slept, the servants had entered. The small braided rugs by their beds were gone. The cushions on their window seats were gone. Even the single faded watercolor of a seaside landscape in Emmeline's room had been removed, leaving a pale rectangle on the wallpaper. They descended for breakfast. The dining room, which Alara had already made austere, was now unrecognizable. The heavy table had been scrubbed raw, the wood pale and splintery, stripped of its wax and polish. The high-backed chairs were still there, but their needlepoint cushions had vanished. Mistress Vance sat at the head of the table, her hands folded. She seemed to thrive in this new, harsh environment. The very air felt thinner, cleaner to her. Mrs. Grieve entered carrying a tray. She placed a wooden bowl in front of each of them. It contained a pale, lukewarm gruel. It was thin, nourishing in the barest sense, and possessed no flavor whatsoever. "We will consume only what is necessary to sustain the vessel," Alara announced, as if this were a perfectly normal morning. "Taste is a vanity. Gluttony begins with the desire for salt." Seraphina stared at the bowl, her stomach clenching. She looked at her mother, then at Mrs. Grieve, who stood watch by the sideboard, her gray eyes missing nothing. "Eat, Seraphina," Mrs. Grieve said. Her voice, flat and cold, made the simple command sound like a threat. Seraphina picked up the wooden spoon and forced the paste into her mouth. Emmeline did the same. the rough spoon scraping her tongue. It tasted like damp parchment. Mr. Silas, meanwhile, was occupied with the structure of the house itself. His task, it seemed, was to manage the atmosphere. He moved from room to room with a bucket of chalky lime wash, not painting the walls, but correcting them. He painted over the faded floral wallpaper in the parlor. He painted over the dark, polished wainscoting. He was systematically erasing the manor's history, replacing it with a uniform, sterile gray-white. But his strangest task was with the clocks. Blackwood Manor had 3. A tall grandfather clock in the hall, a mantel clock in the parlor, and a small fussy carriage clock in Ilara's study. By mid-morning, all of them had stopped. Emmeline found Mr. Silas in the hallway, his hand deep in the workings of the grandfather clock. He had not stopped the pendulum. He had removed it. He was carefully packing the weights and the brass pendulum into his leather satchel. "What are you doing?" Emmeline asked, her voice hushed. "Mr. Silas turned his shadowed head slowly. "Time," he rustled, "is a worldly measure. It creates anxiety, anticipation, regret. These are fevers of the flesh." He held up the pendulum. "The soul requires stillness. Eternity does not tick." He closed his satchel, and the silence in the hall became profound. Without the steady, rhythmic tock-tock of the clock, the house felt dead. The passage of hours was now marked only by the shifting of the pale light, and even that seemed muted. The curriculum began that afternoon. "You have been idle," Ilara announced, leading her daughters to the parlor, which was now bare save for 3 hard, straight-backed chairs. "Idleness is the workshop of the fleshly mind. You will learn the discipline of stillness." Mrs. Grieve directed them to the chairs. "Sit." They sat. "Your hands," Mrs. Grieve instructed, "will be folded in your lap. Your spine will not touch the back of the chair. Your eyes will be fixed on the gray wall. You will not speak. You will not shift. You will not hum," she added, her gaze resting on Serafina. "You will simply be. You will practice hushing the pulse." For the first hour, it was merely uncomfortable. For the second, it was agony. Emmeline's back ached. Her feet, pressed flat to the floor, tingled. Serafina fidgeted, earning a sharp rap on the shoulder from Mrs. Grieve's long, pale fingers. "The body is a disobedient animal," Mrs. Grieve stated, pacing slowly behind them, her footsteps unnervingly light. "It must be broken. It must be taught that the soul is its master. Stillness is the first virtue." Ilara sat with them, perfectly erect, a model of cold composure. But Emmeline watched her mother. She saw the tension in her jaw, the way her eyes, though fixed on the wall, seemed to burn with a desperate, frantic energy. This was not just piety, it was a battle. Her mother was terrified, and she was using this terrible ritual as a shield. Worst of all was the separation. Emmeline and Serafina, though different, were allies. They slept in adjoining rooms, a door connecting them. That night, when Emmeline went to whisper to her sister, she found the door locked. She knocked softly. "Serafina?" There was no answer. She ran to the hall and tried Serafina's main door. It, too, was locked. "She requires solitude." Mr. Silas rustled, appearing at the top of the stairs as if he had materialized from the shadow cast by the newel post. "Her thoughts are too crowded. She must learn to be alone with her own soul." "She is my sister," Emmeline hissed, anger momentarily overpowering her fear. "You have no right. Your mother has given us the right," Mr. Silas replied, his voice a calm, dry whisper. "The taint is strong in her. It must be isolated before it can be scoured." Emmeline hammered on the door. "Serafina, answer me!" She heard a faint sound from within, a small, muffled sob. Then another voice, Mrs. Grieve's, cold and clear from inside the room. "The lesson begins now, child. We will not be interrupted." Emmeline beat against the solid oak until her hands were sore, but the door remained closed. The new servants were not just silencing the house, they were dismantling the family. They were isolating the infected, and Emmeline realized with a sickening lurch that Serafina was their first patient. The following days, or perhaps it was a week, for time had become a gray, stagnant pool, were a blur of ritual and deprivation. The house grew colder. Mr. Silas, it seemed, did not believe in the indulgence of a full fire. The hearths held only a few smoldering lumps of coal, providing just enough heat to make the cold damp rather than sharp. The garden withered. The rose bushes that Mr. Silas had staked were now black and brittle, though the season was not yet cold enough for such a rapid decay. He had driven the life from them. But the true focus of the servants' attention was Seraphina. Emmeline was kept separate. Her days were a monotonous cycle, the bland, cold gruel, hours of stillness in the parlor, often alone, staring at the gray-washed wall, and laborious, pointless tasks, such as polishing the pewter candlesticks with dry rags until her fingers were raw. She was a prisoner, but she was largely ignored. Seraphina was not. She was kept in her room. Emmeline would hear them. She would hear Mrs. Greve's flat, monotone voice, reciting passages of Scripture, not the hopeful Psalms, but the dire, judgmental passages from Leviticus and Revelation, over and over for hours. Then she would hear Mr. Silas. He did not speak. He hummed. It was a low, subsonic vibration that seemed to make the timbers of the house ache. It was the sound of utter, profound emptiness, a sound that seemed to pull the warmth from the air. Emmeline tried, repeatedly, to reach her sister. She would wait until the small hours of the morning, when the house was at its most still, and creep to Seraphina's door. But one of the servants was always there. Once she found Mr. Silas standing motionless outside the door, his back to her, simply listening to the silence within. Another time, Mrs. Grieve was seated on a stool by the threshold, her hands folded, her eyes wide open in the dark, a sentinel of ice. They never seemed to sleep. They never seemed to eat. Emmeline never saw them consume the gruel they served. They simply existed, moving through the manor like particles of the cold gray atmosphere they were cultivating. It was on the 7th day, Emmeline marked it by a scratch on her window frame, that she finally saw her sister. She was in the parlor for her stillness lesson when Mrs. Grieve entered, leading Seraphina by the hand. Emmeline gasped. The change was devastating. Seraphina, once so vibrant, seemed to have been hollowed out. Her skin was the color of skimmed milk. Her eyes, once a bright hazel, were dull and heavy-lidded. Her hair, which had always been a cascade of unruly curls, was now severely parted and slicked down with some kind of wax, making her head look small and fragile. She walked with a slow, shuffling gait, her shoulders slumped. "Seraphina!" Emmeline cried, rising from her chair. "Stillness," Mrs. Grieve commanded, and Mr. Silas appeared in the doorway behind them, blocking any escape. "What have you done to her?" Emmeline demanded, her voice shaking with rage and fear. "We have quieted the fever," Mr. Silas rustled, moving to stand by the cold hearth. "The fleshly hum has been subdued." "She is empty," Emmeline whispered, looking at her sister, who had sat in the chair designated for her, her hands folding automatically in her lap. She did not look at Emmeline. She looked at the wall. "She is receptive," Mistress Vance corrected, entering the room. There was a wild, desperate triumph in her eyes. "She is finally listening. She is not distracted by the follies of the world. She is pure." "She is not pure, Mother. She is ill. Look at her." Ilara looked. She saw Seraphina's perfect posture, her absolute stillness, her vacant, obedient eyes. "She is beautiful," Ilara breathed. "She is finally at peace." "This is not peace," Emmeline shot back. "This is oblivion. It is the peace of the soul that has shed its worldly skin," Ilara insisted, turning on Emmeline. "You, daughter, are still thick with it. Your defiance, your anger. These are the very sins that corrupted your sister. But Mr. Silas and Mrs. Grieve, they will not fail. You will be cleansed as well." That night, Emmeline knew she could not wait. She was not just fighting for her sister's life. She was fighting for her soul. She had to find a weakness. She had to understand what these things were. She waited until the house was in its deepest state of manufactured silence. She knew Mrs. Grieve was with Seraphina. She assumed Mr. Silas was somewhere, watching. She did not go to her sister's door. Instead, she went to the attic, to the servants' quarters. The attic was vast and cold, the roof beams angling sharply. Their quarters were at the far end. Emmeline crept across the dusty floorboards, her heart hammering. There were 2 simple cots, each with a single gray blanket, folded with geometric precision. There were no clothes, no chests, no books. Except for one. On a small 3-legged stool between the cots sat a book. It was not a Bible, it was a ledger, bound in dry, cracking leather. And it was not their book. Emmeline recognized the precise, harsh handwriting. It was her father's. It was the preacher's private journal. Her mother had said he wrote of them. Her fingers trembling, Emmeline opened it. The book was filled with his usual tirades, notes on sermons, lists of sinners in the congregation, lamentations on the weakness of the flesh. But the last few entries, written in a shaky, frantic hand, were different. The flesh is weak. My flesh. The doctors say it is consumption. I know it is the taint. The rot I have preached against. It is inside me. Emmeline felt a chill. Her father had been ill, yes, but he had never spoken of it this way. The next entry, I have failed. My wife is strong, but my daughters, they carry the seed. The younger one, she hums, she is open to the world. I see the stain in her. I cannot pass, leaving the gate open. And then, the last entry, dated 2 days before his passing. I prayed for a scourge. I prayed for a cleansing. Not for myself, but for them. I opened the door. I called to the void, begging it to send physicians, to scour the house, to scour the bloodline. They answered, they do not come from the sea or the city. They come from the stillness. They are the gray curators. They will have their payment. They require a vessel. They require a hushing. I have bargained for the purity of my house. May God have mercy on my soul. Emmeline dropped the book. It hit the floor with a dull thud. This was not salvation. This was a curse. Her father, in his zealous terror, had not found angels. He had summoned something. A bargain, she whispered. The payment is almost due. A dry voice rustled behind her. Emmeline spun around. Mr. Silas stood in the doorway, a tall, gaunt silhouette against the stairwell's darkness. He invited us, Mr. Silas continued, gliding into the room. He did not seem angry. He seemed satisfied. The preacher was a man of great vacuum. He created a space for us with his righteousness, a space that detests noise, detests warmth, detests life. You are not servants, Emmeline said, backing away. We are. We are servants of the great stillness, of the perfect final order. Your father offered us his house. Your mother offered us her daughters. She doesn't know. She thinks you are saving them. She sees what she needs to see. But the vessel is almost ready. His shadowed eyes seem to glow with a cold gray light. Seraphina is almost clean. Soon she will be a perfect quiet shell. And we will be home. The revelation in the attic settled on Emmeline like a coffin lid. Her father had not protected them. He had sold them. In his desperate, prideful zealotry, he had feared the stain of life so much that he had invited the void to replace it. Mr. Silas did not restrain her. He simply watched her with his dead, dusty eyes. You cannot stop the cleansing, he rustled, as if she had spoken her thoughts aloud. The bargain is struck. The mistress wills it. The house accepts it. And what of my mother? Emmeline demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. Is she part of your bargain? A flicker of something, amusement, impatience, crossed Mr. Silas's gaunt features. The mistress is the key. She holds the lock. Her fervor is the fire that tempers the vessel. She believes she is saving her daughter's souls. This belief, it is very powerful. It makes the hushing possible. He stepped aside from the doorway. It was not a gesture of kindness. It was a dismissal. She was irrelevant to him. The work was nearly complete. Emmeline fled. She ran down the attic stairs, not to her room, but to her mother's. She burst into the study, a room that had once been her father's, and which Ilara now used as her fortress. Her mother was not there, but the room was active. Where her father's desk had once held sermons, it now held maps. Not of the county, but of the house. Crude, hand-drawn maps of the manor, with lines and circles drawn in heavy black ink. Emmeline recognized her mother's handwriting, but the words were frantic, obsessive. The taint is in the walls. It moves through the floorboards. Serafina, the focal point. The world seeks to enter through her. The curators are working. They are drawing it out. The air is purer, colder, still, as it should be. Emmeline realized with dawning horror that her mother was not just complicit. She was an active participant in this siege. She was directing Silas and Grieve, pointing them toward the weaknesses. Serafina's humming, Emmeline's questions, the house's warmth. She heard a sound from her father's old adjoining dressing room. She pushed the door open. The room was dark, but a single candle burned. Elara Vance was on her knees, but she was not praying. Before her, on the floor, was a circle of salt, and within it lay the small, faded watercolor of the seaside, the one taken from Emmeline's room. Her mother held a long steel knitting needle, its point heated in the candle's flame. As Emmeline watched, Elara plunged the glowing tip into the painting, right where the painted waves met the shore. Impurity, Elara hissed, twisting the needle. Worldliness, the call of the outside. "Mother!" Emmeline shouted. Elara spun around, her eyes wide and feral. Her face was gaunt, paler than Emmeline had ever seen it. The fervor was consuming her. "You should not be here," Elara said, her voice a low growl. "You interrupt the work." "Mother, look at yourself. Look at this. This isn't piety. This is madness. You have to stop them. They are not what you think." "I know exactly what they are," Elara said, rising to her feet, the needle still in her hand. "They are the physicians my prayers summoned. Your father knew. He knew the sickness that plagued him, the sickness of the flesh." "He didn't call physicians. He called a curse," Emmeline cried, holding out the journal she had taken from the attic. "Read it. He bargained. He didn't want to save us. He wanted to scour us." Elara stared at the book, her face contorting in disgust. His weakness, his doubts. He was infected too at the end. He feared the cure. "There is no cure," Emmeline yelled, grabbing her mother's shoulders. "There is only them. They are hollowing Serafina out. They are turning her into a thing, and you are letting them." For a second, a flicker of humanity, of maternal fear, crossed Elara's face. Her eyes darted toward the door, toward the hallway where Serafina was kept. But then the iron dropped. "She will be pure," Elara whispered, shoving Emmeline away. "She will be clean. And you are the worst of it. You, with your questions, your anger, your life. You are the taint. You are the fever." "Mother, please. Mrs. Grieve," Elara shrieked, her voice cracking. "Mrs. Grave, the other one is here. The infection is strong." Emmeline turned to flee, but it was too late. The door to the study slammed shut, though no one had touched it. The room plunged into a sudden, deep cold. Mrs. Grave was simply there, standing by the desk, as if she had been there all along, hidden in the shadows. "The defiant one," Mrs. Grieve stated. Her voice was flat, but her pale eyes held a flicker of anticipation. "She adds imbalance." "Take her," Elara commanded, pointing a trembling finger at her own daughter. "She is untidy. She must be stilled." "No." Emmeline lunged for the door, but Mr. Silas materialized in the doorway, blocking her path. His tall, thin form was a cage of shadows. "The work is delicate," he rustled. "A loud noise can spoil the settling." "Where?" Elara demanded, her breathing harsh. "The vessel must be isolated," Mrs. Grieve said. "The cold preserves. The root cellar. It is suitably still." "Take her," Elara repeated, turning back to her candle and her tormented painting. "Cleanse this house. Cleanse it all." Emmeline fought. She kicked and screamed, but her hands were grabbed by Mrs. Grave, whose grip was as cold and unyielding as iron bands. Mr. Silas moved behind her, and she felt not hands on her, but a profound energy-draining cold that sapped the strength from her limbs. They did not drag her. They escorted her, her feet shuffling, her struggles growing weaker as the unnatural chill enveloped her. "Mother!" she cried out one last time, looking back. Ilara Vance did not turn. She was bent over the painting, whispering, "Purity, stillness, order, purity." Emmeline was taken from the room, down the back stairs, through the frigid kitchen, and to the heavy wooden door that led to the root cellar. Mr. Silas pulled it open, revealing a square of perfect, impenetrable black. "The fever must break," Mrs. Grieve said, and with a simple, powerful shove, she sent Emmeline tumbling down the rough wooden steps into the freezing earthen dark. The heavy door slammed shut above her, the bar scraping into place. Silence, and the smell of damp earth and rot. The cellar was not merely dark, it was a physical weight of blackness, and it was cold. It was a deep, penetrating cold that came from the earth itself, a cold that Mr. Silas and Mrs. Grieve had cultivated, drawing all remaining warmth from the manor's foundations. Emmeline lay on the packed earth floor, the fall having knocked the breath from her. For a long time she was paralyzed, not by injury, but by a despair so profound it felt like a second gravity. She had failed. She was trapped. Her mother was lost to a righteous madness, and her sister was being unmade, piece by piece, by the gray architects of the void. She pushed herself up. Her hands stung from the cold. She could see nothing, not even the outline of her own hand. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of her own breathing, which seemed shockingly loud. "Seraphina," she whispered, and the sound was immediately swallowed by the damp. She began to feel her way around the perimeter. Her hands met the rough stone of the foundation, slick with a faint, cold moisture. Then wooden shelves, jars, cold as ice. Sacks of root vegetables, long since spoiled, now just mush inside burlap. She was in the prison her mother had chosen, left to, what? To grow cold? To become still, like the house? She leaned against the wall, sliding down to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest to preserve what little warmth she had. She had to think. They are not all powerful, she told herself, her teeth beginning to chatter. They are methodical. They are curators. They hush. They cleanse. They don't. They don't break. They subtract. They had not harmed her, not directly. They had simply removed her. Father's journal. He bargained. He opened the door. What was the price? He had written of a vessel. Emmeline's blood ran colder than the cellar air. They require a vessel. Seraphina is almost clean. Soon she will be a perfect, quiet shell. They were not just hollowing Seraphina. They were preparing her. They intended to inhabit her. They were parasites of the soul, and her father had offered his own child as their new home. Her mother, in her madness, was handing them the key. This realization sparked a new fire. Not of warmth, but of pure, white-hot rage. She would not let them have her sister. She pushed herself to her feet again and began a more frantic, systematic search of the cellar. There had to be another way out. Old houses, especially old New England farmhouses, often had quirks. Her hands ran over the stone foundation again. Stone, stone, mortar, wood. Her fingers brushed against a different texture. A patch of the wall that was not stone, but timber. It was an old bulkhead, long since boarded over from the inside and likely covered with earth on the outside. It was a way out, but it was sealed. She pounded on it. The wood was thick, heavy, useless. She sank back, defeated. The cold was making her thoughts sluggish. She was so tired. The hushing was working. It was so much easier to just sit, to be still. Stillness is the first virtue. Mrs. Grieve's voice, flat and final, echoed in her mind. No. Emmeline forced herself to crawl, to move. She felt her way back to the stairs. The door at the top was a wall of oak. She pushed. It was barred, as she knew. She sat on the bottom step, her head in her hands. She was trapped. And then she heard it, a whisper. It was not from the cellar. It was from above. It was faint, coming from the floorboards of the kitchen overhead. She is not ready. It was her mother's voice, frantic, worried. Then, the cold, flat tone of Mrs. Grieve. The vessel resists, the fever of the elder sister. It creates an echo, an imbalance. The house is not yet pure. Must be pure, Ilara whispered. The final cleansing. It must be tonight. The moon is dark. It will be done, Mrs. Grieve stated. The shell must be emptied completely. We will take her to the chapel. The stone is pure there. The chapel, of course. Her father had built a small, severe stone chapel on the grounds, 50 yards from the house. A place of ultimate purity. And the other one? Ilara's voice, now small, fearful. In the cellar. A pause, then Mr. Silas's dry rustle, seeming to come from the very air. The cold will curate her. She will be still in time. The voices faded. Footsteps receded. Emmeline scrambled back to the bulkhead door. She had a destination. She had a time limit. She felt the wooden panels again. They were held in place by thick planks, nailed horizontally. She tore at them with her bare fingers, splitting her nails, but the wood was solid. She needed a tool. She crawled back to the shelves, her hands sweeping across the damp earth. Her fingers closed around something hard, flat, and metal. A rusted-shut pair of shears. Useless. Then a trowel. The wooden handle was slick with mildew, but the metal was thick. She scrambled back to the bulkhead and jammed the point of the trowel between the plank and the stone wall. She put all her weight on it. The wood groaned. The old nails squealed in protest. The vessel resists. So do I, Emmeline growled and heaved. The plank snapped, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the small space. She attacked the second plank, and the third. It was brutal, exhausting work. The cold had made her muscles weak, her hands numb. But the image of Seraphina, pale and empty, being led to a cold stone altar, drove her. The last plank gave way. She pushed at the bulkhead door itself. It was swollen with damp, stuck fast in its frame. She threw her shoulder against it again and again, until a crack of night air, smelling of pine and frost, cut through the cellar's stench. She pushed one last time and fell out onto the cold, frosted grass, emerging from the ground like one rising from a premature grave. She was free. The house stood behind her, a dark silhouette, its windows like vacant eyes. There was a single faint light moving across the lawn, a lantern, carried by Mr. Silas, lighting the way for Mrs. Grieve, who was half carrying, half guiding the pale, white-clad form of Seraphina. They were heading for the chapel. Emmeline did not run. She stayed in the shadows, her breath pluming, the trowel still clutched in her hand. She was cold, she was weak, but she was alive. And she was furious. The chapel was a small, severe building of gray, uncut stone, built by the preacher to be a place free of worldly comfort. It had no stained glass, only narrow slits for windows. It had no cushions, only hard wooden PF they sat. It was, as Mrs. Grieve had noted, a place of pure stone. Emmeline circled around the back, keeping low to the ground, the frozen grass crunching under her bare feet. She found one of the narrow windows and peered inside. The interior was lit by a dozen stark white candles, their flames unnaturally still in the airless room. The light cast huge, wavering shadows. At the front, where an altar should have been, there was only a flat, gray slab of granite. Seraphina was standing on the slab. She was dressed in a simple white shift, her bare feet stark against the dark stone. Her face was utterly, terrifyingly blank. Her eyes were open, but they saw nothing. She was a doll of porcelain, waiting to be animated. Mrs. Grieve stood beside her, combing Seraphina's hair with a silver-backed comb. Emmeline recognized it as her mother's. But the action was not gentle. It was slow, methodical, and with every pass of the comb, Seraphina seemed to dim. A little more light left her eyes. A little more of the faint color left her cheeks. Mrs. Grieve was performing the final hushing, drawing out the last vestiges of her personality, her memories, her fever. Mr. Silas stood at the chapel door, his back to the room, a gaunt sentinel guarding the work, and Mistress Ilara Vance was there, kneeling on the stone floor. She was not praying. She was rocking back and forth, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She was whispering over and over, "A pure vessel, A clean soul. A pure vessel. A clean soul. But as Emmeline watched, Alara looked up at Serafina, and her mantra faltered. A pure. Alara's face crumpled. My daughter. Serafina. She is so cold. Mrs. Grieve paused, the comb hovering over Serafina's head. She turned her impassive face to Alara. The vessel is ready, Mrs. Grieve stated. It is clean. It is empty, Alara whispered, a terrible, dawning comprehension breaking through her fervor. Where is she? The fever is gone, Mr. Silas rustled, turning from the door. The self is the fever. What remains is order. What remains is peace. No, Alara said, scrambling to her feet. No, this is not. I wanted to save her soul, not erase it. Serafina, child, speak to me. Alara rushed to the slab and grabbed Serafina's arm. It was frigid. Serafina did not blink. This is not salvation, Alara breathed, her eyes wide with terror. This is... What have you done? We have done what you asked, Mrs. Grieve said, her voice dropping, losing its flat, human mimicry and taking on a hollow, resonant quality. We have cleansed the sin of flesh. We have prepared the house, Mr. Silas added, gliding forward. His form seemed to shimmer, his gray suit resolving into something that looked less like cloth and more like dry moss on stone. And now we shall move in. No, Alara shrieked. You lied. You are not physicians. We are curators, Mr. Silas hissed, the sound echoing in the small chapel. He and Mrs. Grieve advanced on the slab. The bargain is sealed. The vessel is offered. I forbid it, Alara cried, placing herself between the servants and her daughter. I revoke the invitation. In the name of God, Mr. Gass. Silas laughed. It was a dry, awful sound, like stones cracking. God is not here, mistress. Your husband banished him. He left only rules. We love rules. Mrs. Grieve raised a hand and shoved Alara. The widow fell to the stone floor, her strength utterly gone, her madness shattered, leaving only a broken, terrified woman. Mrs. Grieve and Mr. Silas turned back to Serafina. They stood on either side of her. They raised their hands. The hushing is complete, Mrs. Grieve intoned. The stillness begins, Mr. Silas echoed. They were about to enter, to claim the vessel. No! Emmeline burst through the chapel doors. She was a wild figure, covered in dirt from the cellar, her hair unbound, the iron trowel clutched in her hand like a dagger. Mr. Silas and Mrs. Grieve spun, their faces, for the first time, showing surprise. The other one, Mrs. Grieve said. Imbalance. You cannot have her, Emmeline screamed, her voice raw. You are too late, child, Mr. Silas rustled, taking a step toward her. The house is ours. The vessel is ours. You are just noise, and we are here to silence the noise. He advanced on her, his form seeming to grow, to stretch, filling the aisle. Emmeline held the trowel up, but she knew it was useless. He was right. She was just noise. And suddenly she understood. They detest noise. They detest warmth. They detest life. She had no weapon. She was the weapon. Mr. Silas loomed over her, his hand, now looking skeletal and gray, reaching for her. Emmeline looked past him, at her sister. Serafina was a blank slate. She needed a memory. She needed a spark. Emmeline dropped the trowel. It clanged on the stone. She took a deep, shuddering breath, and she did the one thing that was the ultimate sin in this house of cold. She laughed. It was a broken, wild, terrified sound, but it was a laugh. Mr. Silas recoiled as if struck. Stop. Remember Serafina? Emmeline cried, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the laughter. Remember Thomas Giles and the stubborn mule? Remember the sun on the wall? She began to hum. It was a chaotic, tuneless sound, the melody of the song Serafina had been humming in the garden. It was life. It was disorder. It was flesh. Stillness, Mrs. Grave shrieked, her voice cracking, her placid mask breaking into a snarl of fury. She clapped her hands over her ears. No, the sides of her head. The candles in the chapel flickered violently. "You hate this, don't you?" Emmeline yelled, advancing on them. "You hate the fever. You hate that we feel." She looked at her mother, who was cowering by the wall. "Mother, pray, but don't pray for purity. Pray for life. Pray for forgiveness. Be loud." Ilara looked at her daughter, at the two inhuman things who were recoiling from the sound. Her fractured mind found a new anchor. Ilara Vance, the woman of iron and ice, threw back her head and wailed. It was a sound of grief, of madness, of regret, of everything she had suppressed for 20 years. It was a terrible, human, messy sound. The effect was instantaneous. Mr. Silas and Mrs. Grave stumbled back. The noise, the raw, chaotic, passionate human emotion, was poison to them. "Order," Mr. Silas choked, his form beginning to dissolve at the edges like dry paper burning. "Imbalance, chaos, fever," Mrs. Grieve hissed, clutching her head as her neat, tight hair unraveled, revealing nothing beneath it. They were creatures of the absence of things. And this room was suddenly, violently full. Emmeline ran to the slab and grabbed her sister's hand. It was still ice cold. "Serafina, come back, I need you, come back." She pulled her sister from the slab. Serafina stumbled, her legs buckling. On the floor, Serafina's eyes, those dull, vacant orbs, flickered. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "E.M.," she whispered. It was enough. The curators let out a synchronized scream. It was not a human sound. It was the sound of a vacuum collapsing, of dry ice cracking. Their forms, their gray suits, their pale faces, it all dissolved. They imploded, collapsing in on themselves, leaving behind nothing but two small piles of gray dust on the stone floor and the faint smell of a snuffed-out candle. The chapel was silent. But this time, it was a real, empty silence. The oppressive weight was gone. Emmeline knelt on the floor, clutching Serafina, who was shivering violently, the hushing broken, the cold of the stone finally registering. Ilara Vance sat against the wall, her wail fading into a low, broken sob. She looked at her two daughters, one covered in earth, the other in a thin white shift, both freezing, but both alive. "What?" Ilara whispered. "What have I done?" Emmeline looked at her mother, her eyes hard. "You almost cleansed us, Mother." She pulled Serafina to her feet. "We are leaving." "Leaving?" Ilara looked confused. "But the house? The house is yours," Emmeline said, her voice hollow. She pulled the cloak from her mother's own shoulders and wrapped it around Serafina, who leaned heavily against her. "You and your shadows. You and your purity." Emmeline half-carried her sister out of the chapel, leaving Ilara alone on the stone floor, surrounded by the still-burning candles and two piles of fine gray dust. They did not go back to the manor. Emmeline took her sister down the long gravel drive, past the blackened, staked rose bushes. As the first faint, warm light of dawn touched the horizon, they stepped onto the coastal road and never once looked back. The coastal road was cold and sharp. The stones bit at Emmeline's bare, muddy feet, and Serafina, wrapped in Ilara's heavy cloak, stumbled beside her, her breathing shallow, her body trembling with a bone-deep chill. Serafina was present, but only just. The hushing had nearly been permanent. Her eyes were wide, blinking at the emerging dawn as if seeing light for the first time. "It's bright," Serafina whispered, her voice a dry rasp. "Yes," Emmeline said, her arm locked around her sister's waist. "It's the sun, Fina. It's just the sun." They walked for what felt like miles, their only goal to put distance between themselves and the gray, silent manor. Each step was an agony, but it was an agony of life, of sore muscles and stinging cuts. A stark contrast to the numbing stillness they had escaped. They were a strange, ruined sight. Two young women, one in a dirt-caked dress, the other in a thin white shift, emerging from the pre-dawn mist. They were fortunate. The first carriage they encountered was that of Dr. Aris, the village physician, who was on his way to a birthing. He was a practical man, stout and kind, who had long distrusted the preacher's zealotry and the subsequent isolation of Blackwood Manor. He pulled his horse to a halt, his eyes widening in shock. "Good Lord, Miss Vance, Miss Seraphina. What has happened? Are you harmed?" Emmeline had no strength for invention. We fled, Dr. Eris. The house, our mother. She is not well. And the servants she hired. Emmeline's composure broke. She could not explain what they were. "They were cruel. They locked me in the cellar. They starved Seraphina. You must help us. Please." Dr. Eris saw the state of Seraphina, the vacant look, the hypothermic shivering, the alarming pallor. He saw the mud and scratches on Emmeline. He did not need to understand the supernatural to recognize a profound human cruelty. "Get in," he commanded, bundling them into the carriage, wrapping them in the thick wool blankets he kept for patients. "We will go to my house. My wife will see to you." He turned the carriage around, abandoning his other call for this more urgent one. As he did, he looked back up the road toward Blackwood Manor, just visible on its hill, a gray smudge against the morning sky. "I never trusted that place," he muttered. "Not since the preacher changed. I tried to call on your mother. She, or rather that tall gray man, turned me away, said the house was in spiritual quarantine." "It was," Emmeline whispered, huddling close to Seraphina. "It truly was." The doctor's wife, a matronly woman with kind, efficient hands, clucked in horror at their arrival. The sisters were whisked inside, bathed in warm water, and put into clean, soft nightgowns. Mrs. Eris fed them hot, sweet broth and thick slices of buttered bread. To Emmeline, the taste of the salt in the broth, the sweetness of the apple jam, it was an explosion of sensation. It was the world rushing back in. Seraphina ate slowly, mechanically at first, as if she had forgotten how, but with each spoonful, a little more awareness returned. The hollow look in her eyes began to recede. Emmeline recounted a heavily edited version of the events. She spoke of her mother's religious fervor, her obsession with purity, and the two servants, Silas and Grieve, who had enabled and amplified it. She described the discipline of stillness, the starvation, the cold, the locked doors. She did not speak of bargains with the void or of dissolving entities. She spoke of a psychological and physical campaign of cleansing that had nearly destroyed them. Dr. Eris listened, his face grim. "Ilara Vance was always brittle," he said finally, and the preacher hammered at her faith until it cracked. I fear her mind has fractured entirely. And these servants, they sound less like staff and more like opportunists, zealots of a different, darker stripe." What will happen to her?" Emmeline asked, the question heavy, obligatory. Dr. Eris sighed. "I will take the constable up there this afternoon. We will see to her. But Emmeline, you and Seraphina, you cannot return. It is not safe." "We will not," Emmeline stated, her voice firm. They stayed with the doctor and his wife for 3 days. Seraphina slept almost constantly, a deep, healing sleep. When she was awake, she clung to Emmeline's hand. She spoke little, but she would watch the fire in the hearth, or the dust motes dancing in the sunlight from the window, as if they were the greatest marvels in the world. She was relearning, reconnecting. On the 3rd day, Dr. Eris returned from the manor. His face was pale. "Well?" Emmeline asked, her heart tight. "It is the strangest thing I have ever encountered," the doctor said, rubbing his eyes. "We arrived. The house was unlocked, and it was empty." "Empty? My mother?" "Gone," he said. "Not a trace of her, or the 2 servants. It was as if no one had lived there for a month. But that is not the strangest part." "What then?" "The house," he said, lowering his voice. "It is cold, unnaturally so. The constable and I, we built a fire in the main parlor, a roaring fire, and the room, it did not warm. The flames, they seemed pale, and the house is silent. No creaks, no settling, just still, like a tomb." He shook his head. "And The food in the pantry, it was all dust. The bread, the flour, just gray dust. The rose bushes in the garden, they are dead, black as if burned, though there was no fire. Emmeline closed her eyes. The curators were gone, but their work remained. They had drained the life not just from the inhabitants, but from the house itself. They had won, in a way. They had their hushing. "What of my mother?" Emmeline asked again softly. "We found this," he said, pulling something from his pocket. It was Alara's steel knitting needle. It was on the floor of the study, beside a painting, which had been pierced through again and again. He looked at her, his physician's eyes full of pity. "Emmeline, I believe your mother, in her distress, has wandered off. Perhaps to the sea." Emmeline knew her mother had not wandered off. She knew with a chilling certainty that Alara had been left alone in that house. And the house was hungry. The bargain had been struck. The price had to be paid. The house had been offered and it had been cleansed. And now it was simply empty. We have an aunt," Emmeline said, the lie coming easily. "In Boston. Our mother's sister. If you could help us with passage on a coach." Dr. Eris nodded, relieved. "Of course, it is the least I can do." The coach ride to Boston was a jarring, rattling re-entry into the world. After the pressurized silence of Blackwood Manor, the noise of the road, the shouts of the driver, the rumble of the wheels, the chatter of other passengers, was overwhelming. Serafina sat pressed against the window, her breath fogging the glass. She seemed less like a person and more like a sensitive instrument, registering every vibration. "It's so loud," she murmured to Emmeline, her eyes wide. "It's called life, Fina," Emmeline replied, squeezing her hand. "It's supposed to be." The aunt in Boston was, of course, a fiction. They arrived in the bustling, chaotic city with only the few coins Dr. Eris had pressed into Emmeline's hand. They were two young, unchaperoned women with no luggage and no connections. They found a room in a boarding house near the docks, a place that was the absolute antithesis of Blackwood Manor. It was loud, crowded, and smelled of salt, tar, and frying fish. It was, Emmeline thought, the safest place on earth. The first week was a trial. Emmeline, possessing a sharp mind and her mother's iron will, tempered thankfully by her own compassion, found work. She had a fine hand and she found employment doing needlework and mending for a tailor. It was grueling work, 12 hours a day, sitting in a crowded room with other women, her fingers aching. But every evening, when she returned to their small room, she would bring a small offering, a piece of fruit, a sweet bun, or a ribbon for Serafina's hair. Serafina, in turn, was slowly healing. The hushing had left deep scars on her mind. She was quiet, prone to long silences, and terrified of the dark. But she was not empty. Emmeline would find her humming, not the vacant, repetitive hum of the cleansing, but real melodies, tunes she heard from the street. She began to draw, using scraps of paper the tailor discarded, sketching the ships in the harbor, the face of their landlady, the vibrant, messy life around them. The sin of flesh, it turned out, was simply the act of being human. They lived this way for months. They were poor, they were weary, but they were free. They spoke of Blackwood Manor only once. It was a winter night, the wind howling outside, rattling their small window. Serafina, who had been quiet all evening, suddenly looked at Emmeline, her eyes dark. Did she hate us, Emmeline? Emmeline stopped her mending. Who? Mother. Did she hate us so much that she invited them? Emmeline put down her needle. This was the most complex, important question she would ever have to answer. No, Fina, she said, moving to sit beside her sister on the cot. She did not hate us. She hated the world. She was terrified of it. She was terrified of life, of feeling, of sinning. She was so afraid of the stain that she chose the void instead. She thought she was saving us from life. But life, Serafina looked at her own hands, at the sketches she had made. It's all there is. I know, Emmeline said, brushing the hair from her sister's face. She was wrong. She was terribly, terribly wrong. Serafina leaned her head on Emmeline's shoulder. I still have nightmares. About them. Mr. Silas. And Mrs. Grieve. I know. So do I. Are they gone? Truly? Emmeline thought of the 2 piles of gray dust. They are. We were poison to them. Our noise. Our fever. They couldn't exist where we existed. They can only live in the quiet, in the cold. And, Mother? Serafina's voice was barely a whisper. Emmeline thought of Dr. Aris's report, the empty house, the dust. She thought of her mother, alone, her madness broken, left with the full, terrible knowledge of her bargain. I don't know, Fina. Emmeline lied, for the first and last time about that day. Dr. Aris said she wandered. Perhaps she found peace. It was a kinder ending than the one Emmeline truly believed. The truth, she felt, was that Ilara Vance had become the final payment. She had been left alone with the stillness she craved, and it had, at last, curated her. A year passed. Winter turned to a vibrant, noisy spring, and then to a hot, humid summer. Emmeline and Serafina moved from the boarding house to a small 2-room tenement, which they furnished with discarded items and made their own. Emmeline's diligence at the tailor shop had earned her a modest raise. Serafina had truly come back to herself, but she was changed. The girl who was once all air and light now possessed a new, quiet depth. She still loved the world, but she saw it with an artist's intensity. She began to sell her sketches by the harbor, and her drawings of the sea and the sailors had a raw, haunting quality that people responded to. They were, by all accounts, survivors. They were building a life from the foundations of their trauma. But Blackwood Manor was not entirely finished with them. One afternoon, Serafina returned from the harbor, her face pale, a small wrapped parcel in her hand. "Emmeline," she said, her voice unsteady, "look at this." She unwrapped the parcel. Inside was a small, leather-bound book. It was not her father's journal. It was a book of poetry, Keats. Where did you get this?" Emmeline asked, her heart beginning a slow, heavy drum. "A man," Serafina said. "A sailor just off a coastal trader from the north. He said he was from our village." "Thomas Giles?" Emmeline asked, thinking of the farmhand. "No, I didn't recognize him. He recognized me. He said, 'You are one of the Vance girls. From Blackwood.' I said yes." Serafina was trembling. "He said the strangest thing. He said the house is for sale. The bank is seizing it for the preacher's old debts." "That's good," Emmeline said, though she felt a cold dread. "It should be." "No," Serafina said, tears welling. "He said, people have tried to go inside, surveyors, men from the bank, and they don't stay. They say the house hates them, that it's uncooperative. It's just an empty house, Fina." "Is it?" Serafina whispered. "The sailor. He gave me this." She held up the book. "He said he found it on the road near the gate. He thought it was ours." But Emmeline, Serafina opened the book. Tucked inside was a single pressed flower, a rose. But it was not dried and faded. It was perfectly black, brittle, and smelled of dust. It was one of the roses Mr. Silas had staked. A wave of dizziness passed over Emmeline. The stillness had a resonance. It had left an echo. That night, the nightmares returned, but this time, they were shared. Emmeline dreamed she was back in the parlor, sitting in the stillness chair, staring at the gray-washed wall. But this time, the wall was not solid. It was shimmering, like a heat haze, and on the other side, she could see Mr. Silas, his face turned toward her, waiting. She woke up in a cold sweat. Serafina was already awake, sitting at the window, staring at the moonlit street. "They're not gone, are they?" Serafina said, not looking at her. "They're just somewhere else." In the stillness Father wrote about, waiting for another invitation. "They are gone from us," Emmeline insisted, her voice sharper than she intended. "We are here. We are in Boston. We are in a loud, warm room. They are nothing. They are the absence of us." But the flower, Emmy, Serafina said, turning, her face illuminated by the gaslight from the street. The flower is real. It's a message. It's from her. From Mrs. Grava. No, Serafina whispered, her eyes wide with a terrible new understanding. From Mother. She's in the house. She is the house. She's still cleansing. Emmeline stared at her sister. The idea was monstrous, that Alara, consumed by her bargain, had not been destroyed, but merged. That her frantic, obsessive need for purity had fused with the cold, vacant order the servants had left behind. Alara Vance, the preacher's widow, had become the stillness. No, Emmeline said, shaking her head. That's madness, Fina. Is it? Serafina replied. She got what she wanted, a pure house, a still house, free of the fever of the world, free of us. The black, dusty rose lying on their table seemed to absorb the light in the small room. The cleansing was not over. It had just settled. The discovery of the black rose shattered the fragile peace they had built. The house, Blackwood Manor, was no longer just a dark memory. It was an active presence. It was a cold, silent entity that had, apparently, remembered them. Serafina fell into a deep melancholy. She stopped drawing. She would sit by the window for hours, not watching the street, but staring inward. She's calling, Serafina whispered one evening as Emmeline was trying to force her to eat some soup. Who?